Okay, how are we doing there?
That's much better.
Oh, brilliant. All right. How are things over there right now?
Well, it's kind of raining, cloudy, miserable, London.
I used to live, years ago, I used to live in Kensington, Olympia, which was right off of High Street, Kensington.
Very nice.
Yeah, I loved it there, man. I could walk straight up the High Street, and I used to go to, in fact, I've got a couple tattoos from this place. It's called the Kensington Market. As you know, yeah. They tore it down years ago, so, you know. I love the place, man. Oh, man, it was just so cool. You could get lost in there, you know.
Yeah, and you had all the culture as well, the museums and everything else.
Yeah. So, anyways, folks, I have Rat Scabies, legendary drummer of The Damned, with us here. And he just told us how things are over there right now. So, now, we have a mutual friend, and she was working with you for, I haven't talked with her probably in a couple months. I mean, I hit her up on Facebook here and there, but Texas Terry, who is from my hometown, Austin, Texas, and she did some work with you and the great Brian James. You guys did some stuff doing commemorating the first couple Damned releases.
Well, it was the anniversary of the first album.
I would have loved to have seen that.
Oh, it was good, you know. I know it's always tough to comment on what you do when you do it, you know. But the people that came seemed to like it, and it was it's kind of one of those things, you know. Brian wrote the first album, and really, it's a bit like Phantom of the Paradise, you know. Only he can play it properly.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, he's an emotional player.
Oh, absolutely. Now, I got to see Brian James at, when I used to, as I told you, I lived in Kensington, Olympia, and right around the corner there, it was now called back then, 1999, it was called, the Orange Room, is that right? Orange Room.
I don't know.
And it used to be called the Nashville Room years and years ago.
Yeah, I know.
And he played a solo gig there, and it was just so cool, you know, to see him do his thing, you know, because I never got to see The Damned. I've seen The Damned several times, and I saw them during your time. I was lucky to see... No, actually, I take that back. I got to see in Anaheim. I did see you guys do the Final Damnation tour. That's right. I did. I stand corrected. It was great, man. It was just so cool to see you guys do that. And I just remember Captain Sensible saying... Some journalist, I can't remember what television journalist it was, but somebody had said, so, you know, you guys are doing this for the... Just for the beauty of punk rock and blah, blah, blah. And he said, no, actually, we're all broke, and we just did it for the money. I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, there's probably an element of truth to it. But the funny thing with The Damned is that it was always about the four individuals, you know, and they often talk about chemistry of a band. But actually, I think, you know, now I look back on it, it's actually probably one of the few bands that it genuinely applied to. I think, you know, I think everybody in the Damned thought they were the best one in the band, you know.
Well, that's what made you guys, and truthful, and all my listeners can attest to this. I mean, you know, the Damned are my all-time favorite band ever, you know, of all time, next to the Ramones. I mean, my all-time favorite band. And to me, what made the Damned so unique is that you guys had such an amazing ability to recreate or reinvent yourself, and but still keep that key ingredient that makes the Damned the Damned. If that makes any sense.
Well, the Damned were probably its own worst enemy. You know, we kind of got it wrong every step of the way. I think we took on, well, we had the ethic that nothing really mattered that much, you know, about if you like, the media and record labels, and we kind of believed in the mythical world of that if you were good at something, people would buy it. And I think we were our own worst enemy because of it, because we, I will say it, but we really didn't give a fuck about anything apart, the only thing we had was the group, really. And so the group was life itself in a way. It was, it's what we were. We were that band. We weren't people that worked in a bank and then decided to be in a group. We weren't anything. We were all sort of hopeless chances who, found something.
Well,
we were lucky. But also, we were on a lot of self-destruct. And I think that's kind of what made the band, but it's also what stopped us being, being recognised. It's kind of weird.
Well, you guys, and I just, this gets argued a lot here in the States for some reason, but history is history, and you guys are actually the very first, have the distinction of being the very first British punk rock band to ever tour the United States.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to play, and a really good dear friend of mine, Mickey Lee, his brother, of course, being Joey Ramone, they were all part of that whole CBGB's thing. And do you remember what it was like the very first time playing at CBGB's, playing in that area?
Oh, yeah. I was really disappointed.
Oh, yeah?
Well, okay, here's the rub with England v. America on who invented punk rock. The Pistols and the Damned and Mick Jones were all functioning, and we wanted to do something, that we liked, which was what became our first album and the Pistols album and the Clash's records, And none of those bands from New York had a record out. And what we used to get instead was there was a record shop. I think it was called Bizarre Records or Skydog Records. It was run by this guy, Larry Dubay and Mark Zamassi. They were kind of big Iggy fans and MC5 fans. And they used to get Punk magazine when it would come out, and they would have it in the store. And we'd go and sign on. And then we'd go to the record store and we'd read through these copies of Punk, and we'd look at photographs of the Ramones and Blondie and Richard Hell and the Heartbreakers and all these groups, but none of us had ever heard anything because none of them had put a record out. And in the meantime, we were still getting on with being the Damned, and, like I said, we were all kind of doing our thing. So I think it's not that you can say which one came first. I think it was a question of it was happening whether you liked it or not.
Right.
And we'd read a lot about Max's Kansas City, and we'd read about CBGB's, and then when we got there, they were actually pretty run down and smelt of piss.
As most clubs do, man. I mean, welcome to Austin, Texas, brother.
Well, there wasn't a punk scene or any punk clubs. It was all kind of, normal venues back in those days. And so when we arrived, we were, first of all, I was disappointed because they had tables and chairs in front of the stage. And people used to eat pizza while they watched the bands play.
Oh, wow.
Which I thought that was kind of fucked up, I didn't... And what was going on in England when we played, there were kind of, there was like a mini riot every time, and the last thing they do is put tables and chairs in a gig,
Right.
And then to suddenly go to this place, which is supposedly the birthplace of New York punk rock, with all of the above-mentioned bands, they kind of... I was thinking, well, how do you watch the Ramones and eat pizza? And it kind of left a sense that it was a little bit more art school and a little bit more creative. Patti Smith was doing poetry and Talking Heads were being artsy-fartsy, and, it was kind of like, well, back home in England, we were, like I say, we lived and breathed it. We were it. Whereas I got the feeling that the New York punk scene was kind of it just seemed to be manufactured. I don't think it really was. I think there were elements of people interfering, but I think there was I think the bands themselves were all pretty genuine, about what they were doing.
Well, Rad, I got to tell you this. I started very, very early being a music fanatic. I don't like the term music geek because I'm not a geek. I'm a fanatic. And when I got turned on to it, and I first, Kiss and Alice Cooper and Black Sabbath, the Stooges, and that kind of thing. I was very, there was no internet in those days, obviously. So, you had to resort to publications, and one of those was Cream Magazine and Punk Magazine, John Holstrom, those guys. And the first time I was in a music shop, and I was they had a section about the British invasion of punk rock, and I opened it up. Of course, I've seen the pictures of the Sex Pistols because they were everywhere, and there was a picture of the Damned. And there you guys were, there you were with your shocking red hair, but there was Dave Vanian standing out looking like he was just going to sprout fangs and just rip your face off, And you guys had a really unique look about you.
Well,
you guys were, and you really hit the nail on the head. You were 4 individuals who really thought that you were the best one in the band. And I think that's what made you guys so great, if you don't mind me saying.
I don't mind compliments ever. I think, it was like the other bands all kind of almost had a collective image. Like the Clash all had the same paint over their guitars and clothes, and the Pistols all had the safety pins and the T-shirt thing, and the Damned used to dress out of, thrift stores. And we didn't really, I don't know, I suppose we were quite proud of our independence of each other.
Well, you guys, as you would say in Britain, you guys did dress pretty smart. You did, but you still had a sense of darkness about you and I love the darkness, man. And I think you guys had a sense of darkness that really, that was captivating and very endearing, if I might say.
Well, the thing was, you had Dave, who always looked that way, no matter what time of day or night. One of the reasons why Dave was considered cool by us was that he was always that way. Even if he was digging the garden or working on a car, he still looked impeccably goth. And Brian always looked like a rock star anyway. With that whole thing, I didn't really have a clue. And the Captain was kind of more like the Joker then, he was very menacing. It probably seems a bit funny to say that now to people that, now he's sort of grown up and calmed down. But actually, he was, he's a real big guy, and he was very frightening on stage, and there was a great deal of schizophrenic awareness about the Captain when he lumbered towards the audience. They kind of used to back off because it was like the Joker. He kind of, nobody really knew. And I guess being a mad drummer thing kind of suited me down to the ground in the fact I wanted to be as noticed as the other 3. And so, yeah, I don't know, what do you say? We were there, we did it. We didn't think that we should wear a uniform. We felt that, we could wear whatever we wanted, and if it looked good. And then it looked good because that's why we were in the band, was because we kind of shared our own, our own thinking.
Well, I've heard a couple people, I've talked to a couple people, and for whatever reason, the Damned have come up in conversation, contemporaries of yours, and they all said the same thing, that, punk rock, and not to say that it was fabricated or anything like that, but sometimes you kind of got pigeonholed into this concept of thinking or almost like a uniform you had to wear, not the damned, but they would say not the Damned. These guys, this is who they were. They really, you confirmed that because for example, Dave Vanian, this was not him being Count Dracula. This was him. This is Dave Vanian. This is Rat Skate. These guys. This is how they really were.
Yeah, nobody had pajamas. Nobody put on their clean clothes after a show. It was. We walked down the street and we turned up the same way as we walked on stage. And that was, well, that's nice that, people know that or recognise it. Well, I'm not sure how much good it's done us.
Well, I don't think, I don't think this is going to hurt Captain's image or anything, but my daughter just really, at the time when she met, we and I had Captain on my show, and he was, she was very, very endeared, found him she just really hated leaving when it was time for us we had to go because they're getting ready to go on stage, and she did not want to, there's a picture of us. She's sitting next to him and eating grapes with him. I don't know if that's going to kill his image. But my daughter is, she just loved him, and so, but he was, it's funny. It's fun to hear these stories about people, now they're older and mellowed out and everything. And for you to say that, because I can actually hear, I've actually heard stories about, when he was younger, he was not a guy to mess with.
No, he was psycho. Well, he still is, but he's probably got it a bit more reined in on the country. He's got psycho hour now where he's allowed to be a fucking idiot. But I think, it's, we did everything to excess that we could. And that wasn't that excessive considering the budget we used to have. But it never really thought to us that there'd be more beer the next day. We always kind of, I always thought, well, this is going to stop tomorrow, So I might as well take that beer with me.
I've mentioned, now over the years, I've tried my best to keep up with a lot of bands, obviously, because being a radio personality, and I don't really like titles. I'm like I said, I'm a music fanatic, and I just happen to have a radio show, so I don't consider myself media or any bullshit like that. But I try to keep up, and over the years, and one of my favorite music, I hate call whatever you want to call it, music films or whatever you want to call it. There was at the time it was on VHS. It was the Final Damnation show where you guys filmed a whole show. I forget where it was, and there was
country in London.
Okay, yeah, that's right. And there were segments where you guys had your own little interviews and things like that. Brian James made a very I've never been able to get this out of my head, and I kind of see where he was going with it. But he made the comment, and I wanted to get your feelings on it. He said, Rat Scabies is the damned.
Well, it's very kind of him to say something like that. But, I've got to say, I always thought it was his band. I really don't know. And it's not for me to say about that, I don't think. But I was quite surprised when he said that as well. And he said it to me as well, that it was my band, and I'm not really sure how he gets there with that, because he was the one who was he wrote all the songs, and it was kind of his vision much more than mine. I just kind of,
Well, but weren't you kind of the inside? Every band I've heard, and the bands I've been in my time, you always have, if you do have a manager, you have somebody who's outside the band, but bands always have that inside guy who functions as the inside manager. And I've heard stories that you were kind of that guy. You were the guy that held it all together, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I couldn't deny that. That's pretty true, I think. I was, I don't know why. I was, because I certainly wasn't chosen. It just seemed that I don't know, more capable, more willing, had enough energy to kind of, take on some of that stuff. But I wasn't really that good at it, I think it was, you do what you have to do. Well, I cared about the group. It was all I had. And so if something needed doing and there was nobody else to do it, then I'd do it. So it wasn't like I sort of thought, oh yeah, I can control this from the inside, because there's no way you could control Brian, Dave, or Captain.
Well, have you seen the band since you have? I mean, you left in what was it, '99, correct?
Oh, probably a bit earlier than that, probably '97. Well, yeah, not really. I speak to Dave every now and again, and Brian went out and we played some shows. You said with Texas, and the Captain I just don't talk to at all.
Okay,
which is. I don't know. I think I have a regret in advance, which is that at some point there'll be three of us standing around a grave saying we should have done that reunion when we could. And I think, I think it is sad that we've got to where we are and a great band can't carry on anymore. Or isn't functioning anymore, because it could do, and it should do. And it's kind of, with the line-up at the moment, it's kind of, for me, anyway, it doesn't have much heart and much soul. There's too much vampire and,
yeah,
too much clowning, and it's too independent. When we were doing something like Strawberries and the Black Album,
oh, those are great.
Dave and Captain. You see, Dave can't play a musical instrument to save his life. And he certainly couldn't. But he could mess with things like on an organ, and he could come up with ideas, and he had a brilliant imagination for a concept, like Curtain Call, for example. And because he couldn't play anything, what used to be real good was when him and Captain would sit down together and Captain would interpret Dave's ideas. And that's how we came out with things like Stranger on the Town and Yada Yada and the other stuff, those two actually work together on. And when I hear the band today, I'm kind of very aware that isn't what's happening. What's happening is they're both writing individual songs, which they're both playing. But it doesn't sound to me as if they're working as a collective, and I think that's really kind of tragic because, Captain, bless him, has got a brilliant sense of melody, and he can be a great writer, but he doesn't have a clue how to get off the starting block.
Yeah.
And he lacks direction, and if you give him direction, and a direction to go in with a song, and you say, well, this is kind of what we could do real easy, and he can pick it up and run with the ball. And Dave's a brilliant conceptualist, he'll come up with a great concept and an idea. And it becomes even better because Dave had kind of enough respect for the rest of the band to let them expand those ideas, if you like. And that worked really well. And that is kind of why it isn't there now. And that's why I think it's a shame, because, they need to get back on that tip.
Yeah. Well, Rhett, I've got to say this because I'm a bit of a romantic and I'm a very sentimental kind of guy. I'm not trying to be funny or cute. I'm being serious. I really am. I cannot think of a better time, a better season for the original four guys seriously, because young people are getting aggravated. I've noticed that. A lot of the young people, my daughter is barely 6 years old, and they have a little music school, their little music time at her little kindergarten class. And all kids, they encourage all the kids to bring a CD with them from home so they can play it. And she brought my Black Flag and my Ramones CD with her. And because that's what she hears at home, that's music to her. And she said, this stuff you guys are listening to, this is stupid music. They were listening, what was it? Who's big? The girl with her tongue sticking out. Miley Cyrus and all this other crap, you know. That's what kids are into now. But I've noticed teenagers.
I don't think it's what they're into. I think it's what we're fed by the manufacturer.
Exactly.
It's
and
like shoes. You know, you want to buy a pair of shoes, you don't get to choose the shoes you want apart from the selection that's in the store.
Well, what I wanted to tell you is that I have seen 16-year-old kids, 15-year-old kids with colored hair wearing the damn T-shirts. Yeah, and seriously. And they know who you are. I mean, the kids is, you know, music doesn't die. I mean, just because we get older, just because things move on, doesn't mean music is immortalized. It really is. And I mean, God bless his soul, Joey Ramone. I mean, even though he's left us, I mean, he's still here. You know, his music still lives.
Well, the Ramones will be around in 1,000 years, you know.
Well, that first Damned record, I mean, every song is a classic. I mean, every song.
Well, the thing is that it's a bit like anything that's a summary of an era and of a generation always stays. And it stays around even longer if it has quality. And I think, you know, something like the Ramones' first album will always be around. You know, it's just got everything that is there. And I know a lot of people cite many other bands as being classics, but that what happened in 1976 is something that is still, you know, like throwing a brick in a pond or something. You know, the shockwaves are still kind of traveling out there. And I don't think it's, you know, I don't think it's getting bigger, but I think it's definitely, it made such an impression that it took until kind of, you know, couple of years ago, maybe 5 years ago, for it to stop having a massive effect on everything that was going on. And I include, you know, the kind of whole 80s thing with the Nirvanas and all of that kind of white noise distortion bands, you know, that kind of really took that sound and that template and that attitude from, you know, punk.
Right.
And I you know, that's a good thing to have been a part of. But I don't, you know, I know everybody talks about how there's such a big punk kind of revival, but actually I don't see it that way. I see it as it's still something that's being noticed.
Well, I think the kids nowadays, Rat, what I was wanting to elaborate on is that I think they're craving they're craving the originals. They're craving the classics.
But there's in there though. You see, I agree with you. I think they are. But why isn't there some snotty kid with a guitar doing it already for himself? It seems like none of them seem interested in doing that, or don't really. I'm not sure if it's they don't seem able to change anything, but there's probably even more now to rebel against than there ever was. And I'm just really surprised that nobody's doing it.
Yeah.
Why aren't they? It's, you know, it's cheap, it's easy. And it's kind of, I'm just kind of, it's almost as if that now music is seen as purely like the X Factor. And I think most kids that would have taken up a guitar or something now feel that they deserve a 15 minutes of fame, and because everybody else gets one. And if they get on one of those shows and play music like they have on those shows, then, you know, then there'll be a success, as opposed to sitting there feeling very angry about the fact that they're not being allowed to be exposed. Because, you know, that kind of whole X Factor thing, you know, none of the greatest rock singers in history would have made it past the auditions.
No, I totally agree with you on that. They wouldn't have. Because those people, listen, Rat, those people that sit on those, who was it? Sharon Osbourne, and not nothing against Sharon Osbourne, but what was his name? Simon, the guy Simon, and these other people. They all.
Ozzy Osbourne auditioned for that show because
he would have bombed.
Yeah.
But he's one of the greatest performers of all time. You can't take anything away from those early Black Sabbath records, man.
No, what a great records. No, absolutely. But he would not be able to get on those shows.
No.
Even if he was 18 again, he still wouldn't be able to get on it.
Never.
Either would Jim Morrison, and Iggy certainly wouldn't. And Bowie, he would have been, made it to the semi-finals or something. But you know what I mean? It's that.
Could you imagine John Lydon on one of those shows?
Absolutely not. Or Joey Ramone.
Joey Ramone, absolutely.
Yeah.
But that's what made that's what makes it kind of tragic in a way, because that independent, not to steal or coin a phrase, but what made everything unique, like for example, the Damned, the Clash, the Pistols, Eddie and the Stranglers, the bands of that era, was because there was a sense of this chaos. It was very chaotic, but it was beautifully independent as well.
And also, the other thing that's very interesting I find about that is that not one of those bands you mentioned sounded like the other. They all had a completely unique sound.
No band sounded like the Damned.
No, and no one else sounded like the Pistols. The Ramones were the only band that sounded that way. The Stranglers certainly didn't sound like anyone else.
No.
The Hot Rods didn't, Dave Hicks, God rest his soul. And it was, most of what fed us was energy and a sense of rebellion, which the MC5 and the Stooges were responsible for to a degree, and then so was Lou Reed. And you can kind of argue this thing about how far back do you go with it, because, it's a debatable point. But, I think the MC5 were probably the one most consistent band through all of the other bands. And that's not to take away from English bands who, like the Kinks and the Who and the Small Faces. They were all kind of the influence, but they were all the bands that had a sense of trouble about them and destruction, and weren't that happy with the world, which was a viewpoint that changed, and it was kind of what lost all of those bands the support of us anyway. Now, just the fact that they hadn't really, they'd all gained this huge sort of stadium-like success, but nothing had changed. We were still getting stopped by the cops, and it was a tough life, I guess, in a lot of ways. It was always poor, and nothing that any of these bands that were sort of revolutionary that had stayed together had actually managed to do anything about any of it. The MC5's most saving grace is that they split up and weren't around to be called a disappointment.
Yeah. They quit while they were on top, pretty much.
Yeah, that probably just come out completely the wrong way around. But you know what? It's not that. It's like Jimi Hendrix. What would have happened to him if he'd just stuck around? He'd have probably ended up working with Bob Marley and doing a lot of psychedelic reggae. Or
worse yet, man, might have gotten caught up in the whole disco movement. Wouldn't that have been horrible?
Mm.
Oh, that was that's another thing I wanted to mention, man. It's like during that whole time when I first started reading about bands like the Damned, the Clash, the Pistols, and that sort of thing, disco was real big on AM radio. Here in America, I don't know, it was horrible. Radio was just dreadful. It was just, it was horrible. And so that's what made, to me as a listener, and hearing this amazing independent sort of just this awesome nastiness. It was just awesome, you know.
Like opposites. When you've got something neat, tidy, clean, and fresh like disco was, then the next logical step is to do exactly the opposite, which is to be scruffy, loud, and obnoxious. And I think, you know, but I always have time for dance music in so many ways, because that's the primary source of it. And that's the primary reason for it being there, is that people dance. You know, and that goes way back, you know, to even, you know, the tribal sitting around a fire and banging logs. It's all about movement.
Yeah.
And coming from a band that was very difficult to dance to, I think, you know, but the expression was there in other ways, you know, with the people jumping around and just doing their own thing, I guess. That was kind of just as important as being able to make Travolta-like moves on the dance floor. But I never kind of really rubbish any kind of dance music, because I think that's, you know, that's kind of what it's about. And it's about something different for the listener. You see, the people that tend to like dance and disco and everything aren't really that big of music fans.
No.
They don't really listen. They want something that's like a background to a night out.
Right, absolutely.
And so they're not looking to determine whether they like the song or whether they, you know, they like the chorus and they like some of it. But they're not people like you and me that sit there with headphones on and, you know, and the music is just enough. I kind of, you know, that's one of my greatest pleasures, is just listening and wallowing in sound, you know, and what people have done and how it moves you, because it's an emotion music. It's not a, you know, it's an automatic as well.
Right.
I mean, that's the other thing that's I always find quite, like, if you have to, when you hear a piece of music you really like for the first time, and you know it just grabs you, you don't get a choice. It's just something that puts its hand around your heart, and you just like, I'm with this. Whatever it is, I don't care, but that's mine, you know? And if you have to stop and listen to something to decide whether you like it or not, then it's not triggering that chemical reaction that happens with, well, I don't know if it's good music, but the music that you kind of are drawn to.
I agree.
It's, if you have to work it out, then it isn't for you.
Exactly.
Most of today's music that's commercially successful is, you know, you have to stop and think whether you like it or not.
Let's go to traffic with your eye in the sky. Sinclair, how we looking?
Well, let me tell you, Dave, we're not looking good here. Los Angeles is in a shithole. There's just traffic everywhere. Too many people, Dave. We got way too many fucking people. Hey, Dave, I'm gonna have to call you back. I'm having a little emergency.
What, like you're crashing?
Yes, Dave, I'm crashing. I never liked you, Dave.
What?
Back to you in the studio, Dave.
Okay, let's take a check on the weather.
Well, you know, I've mentioned this, I think, to you in a message before, but my all-time favorite record, and this is by no stretch of the imagination, is this a slide against Brian James, because he's one of the greatest ever. But for whatever reason, Machine Gun Etiquette is one of the albums that The Damned did that really triggered that emotion in me. To me, it's it's my all-time favorite record of all time. And you worked with a fellow named Paul Gray, who Eddie and the Hot Rods, but he also played with UFO, which was pretty cool, because I love UFO. I'm not gonna lie, I love UFO. Only the Michael Schenker era of UFO is the only UFO I care to listen to. But you know, what was the recording sessions like during that time of that record?
We were really lucky. and we had a record company behind us that saw potential in our writing, and they used to book a studio that, you know, for like a couple of weeks at a time, and then me and Captain would go in every day and just make music. And we didn't know anything about writing songs or anything, but we knew we could kind of do something with the guitars and the instruments. So we were really openly encouraged to be creative. And part of that was also that because we weren't, you know, we're musicians, if you like, because we weren't that, we didn't really have a rule book, and we could do things that, you know, like if I wrote a song on the guitar, it would only ever have 2 strings or 1 chord shape, because I couldn't change shapes, you know, and I couldn't play proper chords and everything, which is something that a guitarist would never do. So we used to be able to sort of break the rules with what we did just by our naivety, really, in the fact that we weren't, or didn't regard ourselves as proper musicians. And so writing that album was all about that. It was a bit like, you know, just discovering what you could do without really knowing. And hey, Wolf, how you doing? Sorry, you got it?
Yeah, I got it.
Whee!
Start next week.
Brilliant.
Right.
Oh, well done, son. Good on you. My boy's just come home. He's just been for a job interview with Jesus, so we've given him.
Oh, cool. Well, good. Tell him congrats, man.
I will do. Oh, that's good.
Now, one of the songs on Machine Gun Etiquette is a song called Love Song, which I love a lot. And one of the, you know, you always have these little stories that flow around, and you know, and Lemmy from Motorhead actually has a very distinct bass style. You know, he plays the bass like a rhythm guitar. That's what he's always said. And there was he obviously did a tenure with you and Dave Vanian and Captain Sensible, and you guys, you called yourself the Doomed, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
And now, was that song written? Because that's what I've been told. I wanted to clarify that with you. Is that where that distinct bass line, the intro, comes from, or?
No.
Okay.
Captain wrote that.
Oh, cool.
He came up with that bass part. It's, I wrote the lyrics and Captain wrote the music. So that was how that came about. It wasn't sad. I mean, we all love Lemmy. And at one time in '75, when Motorhead weren't working, because I think Phil Taylor was in jail, but Brian and I used to see Lemmy every Saturday in a pub in Portobello Road. And we were very, very close to asking him to join the band, you know, because he was a big MC5 fan as well, you see, which was something that a lot of old guard musicians, you know, weren't. So we had a kind of, you know, we always knew him and we always got on with him. And he nearly asked to do the job, but, you know, I can't remember what happened. I think we just drank beer with him instead.
That's what I miss about London, man, is the pubs. Being able to, and when I used to live in a place called Wandsworth Common.
Yeah, I know it.
And I used to go across, there was a Young's Brewery. You know, a free house. You call them free houses there.
Isn't that not the Coach and Horses pub?
I believe so. It's been a long time, man. It's been a long time ago.
But Young's beer, that's strong.
Oh man, they had this double chocolate stout. And I'm not kidding, man. You could put a pencil and it would stand up. But it was, as you would say in Britain, man, it was gorgeous. It really was. It was really nice. And but I want to read a quote from Joe Strummer about the Damned, and I don't agree with it. No disrespect to the late spirit of Joe Strummer. I don't agree with it because I thought the Damned were the best musicians in the whole British punk rock scene, in my opinion. But it says, I've changed my opinion of the Damned. I've seen them a lot. I think they're fun to watch. They play good. The only thing I have against them is that it don't play as well as us. Is he just taking the piss, or is he just...
Yeah, sure he was. Yeah, I'd say he was. When was that?
Oh, somebody sent it to me. Because I get people that they want me. A couple people wanted me to ask you a couple questions.
The Damned used to have a philosophy about playing live, which was what we realised was that every group sounded pretty much like their record, and we'd go into a town and they'd tell us about the band that had been on the week before, and you say, well, what were they like? And they say, oh yeah, they were really good. And then it'd stop, and you realise that we were that week's travelling circus. And so what we figured out pretty quickly was that if you went up and sounded just like the record and you weren't sensational enough, like setting fire to the drums or Captain pissing all over the front of the row or whatever, you would be forgotten by the following Friday, And so we figured that actually it was okay to drink as much as you liked and then go on stage and be a chaotic shambles. And people would remember you much more for that than they would for playing perfectly. So maybe Joe saw us then.
Well, I did get to see the Clash a couple times, and they were, of course, were just absolutely amazing. And I've always heard that he was a very personable. Joe Strummer was a very personable kind of guy. There was nothing rock star or pretentious about him whatsoever.
Well, he was a rock star. I mean, I did have the pleasure of working with him. I think it must be around 97, 98. And we worked together for quite a long time. And I absolutely loved Joe. He was great. He was funny. He was charming. He was on the ball when it came to making decisions. And but he was also kind of loose as well, though. You know what I mean? He wasn't uptight, but at the same time, he knew exactly who he was and what he was. He knew that people recognised him when he walked into a bar or a club or somewhere, and he shied away from a lot of it, I think. But he used to leave notes all around the studio and stuff, just reminders of things that were funny. And it was, I think his death was absolutely tragic. I think it was a very sad day.
It was very shocking. It was really shocking, to be honest, because he's one of those guys, that I've heard other people say, like, and I know you're going to probably agree with, he should still be around. You keep looking for him, kind of person,
Yeah. It's a void, that hasn't been filled. He was, I don't know. What do you do, though? That's the way of the world, isn't it? We live.
Yeah.
And, we hope that we do the right things while we're around.
Well, I kind of going along with that line, and you as somebody who has loved the Damned for over 30-something years, that being myself, I always have this hope that the original four guys, and I have seen the Damned recently. Without, obviously, you're not behind the kit. And they got this guy Pinch who was in the English Dogs, and he does a great job. Don't get me wrong, and all respect to him and everybody. And it's always good to see the Damned. But as somebody who also I used to be I used to be a chef, and sometimes you can't have all the ingredients that you need to make a certain dish.
Yeah.
And you know, you try to improvise. And I think that's what bands do. They can never get that distinct flavor back, and they have to compensate.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And I think that's what the Damned, because let's face it, you were that, you brought that flavor. I mean, I kind of see what Brian James is saying as well. You brought that flavor, man. There was something about your drum style, you know, that, you know, it's like, it'd be like the Damned without Dave Vanian singing. You just can't.
I don't know whether it was me or whether it was that they had to go along with what I was doing. It's a two-way street. But that's such a difficult thing to comment on, really, to be honest with you, you know, because it's, you know, it's mighty praise indeed. And deep down, I agree with you, but I couldn't really say it out loud without feeling wrong, because I never, you know, I wrote quite a few things and ideas, and I was a big part of the band and all of that stuff, but at the same time, it was as much about the other guys as it was more. I always thought more about the other guys than it was about me. They were the ones that would come up with, you know, the notes.
Well, you know, man, without the drummer though, I mean, I think drummers get overlooked a lot with because I guess being a music somebody who worships music like I do, I can tell the difference. I can hear a drummer, and I know it'd be like trying to imagine a band like the Descendants or Rush without Neil Peart. I mean, you just can't. It's just not the same.
I know what you're saying. I mean, I remember the Who when after Keith Moon died, and I saw with several drummers, and you can play in time and you can play the same fills, but there's something about it that just ain't the same.
Did you ever get to see Keith Moon Rat?
Yeah.
Oh man, what was it like? And I bet it was awesome.
There was a lot going on.
I mean, he had such personality. I mean, I remember I was very, very young when he I do remember when he passed away.
Well, he played with a band. That's the real difference. Is you got, you know, drummers that keep time, and you got drummers that listen to what's going on around them. And the ones that listen to what's going on around them are the ones that I just think add more to the group. You know, they add more to the songs. It's a bigger dynamic. And, you know, anybody can just keep time for the bass player. But actually what you really want to do is you want to let rip and get out there and add to what's going on. Me and Brian were always good at that. And I think that was because the generation before us was all about drummers and guitarists. It was always about, you know, it was Page and Bonham, it was Moon and Townsend, it was Mitchell and Hendrix. It was all the bands we liked were, you know, all about guitars and all about drums. And the bass player used to just really be the anchor guy, you know. And I think we were probably, you know, that's where we were coming from too. I know I was.
Well, hey, somebody wanted me to ask you. I got a question, and I kind of want to get a couple of them out of the way because and I want to be considerate of your time too. So if you need to move, you know, go or whatever, just let me know. I don't want to keep you overstay my welcome.
Okay.
But somebody wanted me to ask you: is there truth that Sid Vicious was offered the frontman job and he didn't show up? And Dave showed up and he got it? Is that true?
Yes. And it's quite odd in a way because that story floated around for years, that Sid couldn't be bothered to show up. And then I was talking to somebody the other day who knew him pretty well, the other few weeks ago. And they were saying that actually he was waiting on a phone call to be told where it was, and he never got the call.
Oh, isn't that weird?
Isn't it? And so, yes, it is very true that Sid was supposed to be coming down. It is true that he didn't. But whether he would or wouldn't have been in the band or not is open,
Yeah, but how different would have history been?
Oh, totally.
I mean, and Dave Vanian to me is, he has such and I love that album he did, and the Phantom Lord,
Phantom Chords.
Phantom Chords. I'm sorry. Why am I? My coffee hasn't kicked in yet. I'm sorry. The Phantom Chords, which I play on my Sunday night show. He almost has sort of a. He could do rockabilly if he wanted to. I mean, he's got a very classic rock and roll style to his vocal style.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a proper singer, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. I think that's what spoiled him. He was much better when he wasn't.
Yeah.
The first couple of albums, I don't know, it was one of those things by the time we got to Phantasmagoria.
Love that album.
But Dave was kind of finding his own feet in what he wanted to be as a singer, instead of, kind of having to pick notes that competed with the guitar and the cymbals. And I think he kind of, I think he developed, and he wanted his voice to be much more of a voice rather than just a vehicle for the tune. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
And so because I remember being in the studio and he wouldn't double track any of the vocals, which used to upset every producer we worked with. Because that's like a real old trick for singers. They double track the vocal and it always sounds much better. And Dave wouldn't do that. He wanted to be heard as he was, in a very honest kind of step, I think, for his kind of voice. But yeah, he kind of, you wouldn't know about it, but in the 1950s and early 60s, when we were small kids growing up, the fairgrounds would arrive in town, the travelling fair. And they would be the most fun thing you could do when you were a kid. They used to have ghost trains and bumper cars and,
right.
Every fair has. But on the best rides, on the fastest ones and the Wurlitzer and that stuff, they'd always be playing like Johnny Remember Me and kind of really cool 50s rock and roll. And there'd be like the Wall of Death and motorcycles, and there'd be gangs of rockers hanging around and leather jackets. And I think a lot of Dave's thing really is just harking back to his youth of, fairground rides and motorcycles and almost cowboys and Indians and, that whole kind of thing about being a kid. And I think Dave still wants to be that kid. The ghost train.
Well, but I think that's what makes him so much fun to watch, and I still have this image in my head. Last time I saw them play, and my little girl was sitting. My little girl's lucky, man. She's gotten not even 6 years old. She's gotten to see and meet a lot of really cool people that I would have loved to have been able to say I've gotten to meet, even when I was a teenager. I never did, but we were sitting at on the foot of the stage, on the side of the stage there, and Dave Vanian, and we came by, Captain comes by, and he has these two, he's famous for his sunglasses he wears on stage, and he had these white framed ones, and he had these black framed ones, and he has my daughter's name Mermaid, and he said, okay, Mermaid, which one should I wear? The white ones or the black ones? She said, wear the white ones. And he wore the white ones. And here comes Dave out, and he's smoking a pipe as he's walking on stage, and wearing like a smoker's jacket. He looks like he just came out of the study. He did. It was awesome, man. Oh God, it was, and they put on, of course, an amazing show. But you know, I have to be, and I have to be honest, and again, this is no offense to Pinch, because he was a great drummer and he did a wonderful job, and I love the English Dogs and all that, but it just didn't. I'm one of those. I guess I'm one of those romantic kids. I keep wanting to see Rat Scabies walk behind that kid again. You know, I'm sorry. I just, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but keep.
Well, it's not my decision to make.
I'm sorry.
Truth on that, and it's It's also, it's probably as much my fault, but I don't want to go backwards. And if, to go back into the Damned or to do something like that, I think I could only do it if it was back to being creative and making a new record. I understand the whole thing about the audience, and, you guys in the audience are really the band's worst enemies, because when you go to see a band, all you actually want to hear is their hits and the records that you have at home. And in the case of something like New Rose, having played that for so many years, it gets really boring to be convicting, to play it with conviction, and what you really want to do is make another great record.
Yes.
Then supersedes the ones in the past. So you can actually feel as if you're still developing as a player. For me, that's everything. That's why I play music. I didn't play music to play the same songs for my entire life. I play it because I enjoy the revelation of something, being able to do something new or something that I didn't think I could do. It's important. And that's everything.
And now a message from Bruce Lee.
Empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless. Water can flow or it can crash. My friend, be the teapot.
Thanks, Bruce. Let's get back to the show.
Absolutely.
I've been harassed for my phone, dude.
Well, so listen. So what are you doing nowadays? I mean, I know you did some work with my friend Texas Terry, and you guys. And I would have loved to have seen that show. I would have loved it. And I heard she did. She didn't try to be Dave Vanian. She just did Texas Terry doing the damn songs. Well, and I heard she did a great job. Well,
that was the thing, was that we started out, we had a friend of mine singing who was real good, but as soon as he came on stage, you could just feel the audience go, that's not Dave Vanian. And the thing with Texas that really worked for me was that she was the exact opposite of what anybody expected. So when we went on stage, it was kind of, the audience seemed somehow to be more open to the idea of Texas than they would have been to anyone else. And only Dave Vanian is, that's who they all want. So it kind of really worked out in that way. Plus, she was real good. I have to say, she put on a great show, and she, crowd, surfing the crowd and throwing out roses and saying motherfucker all the time. She was, it was a good move. But really, after we'd done it for a year, the kind of anniversary was over, and it wasn't moving on. It was still going out and playing those same old songs.
Right.
Which is good, but for me, I like I say, I get really frustrated with that. It's not why I do it. And, yeah.
Well, you know, Rat, I got to ask you this, and I'm trying to move along here because I feel like I need to,
I'm starting to get bored.
Yeah, I don't want to overstay my welcome with you, and I know and I make sure to let your family know that we appreciate them allowing us to have some of their time with you and all this stuff, because I mean they're giving up their time with you to allow you to come and hang out with us. So we let them know we appreciate them. But what they're, of course, I would love to see you once again do the thing with Captain Sensible and Brian James and Dave Vanian. But if Rat Scabies could put together a project with some of your favorite players, favorite musicians, alive or dead, who would that be?
Oh, I don't know. That's a tough super group question. And I've been asked it before, and it's really tough because there are so many good ones out there. I always wanted to work with Jello Biafra.
Oh yeah.
I always thought he'd be a good frontman for something. I mean, if we can have Dead or Alive, I really don't know who I could choose, because there's just so many good ones out there, be it, Joey Ramone or Joe Strummer. But mostly singers with the name Joe.
Yeah.
The initial J.
Well, that's very interesting. You admit, why Jello Biafra? That's really interesting.
I loved his voice. I always thought he had a great voice. And of course, another singer I really liked his voice was Malcolm Owen from the Ruts. He had a great voice.
Oh wow, yeah.
But there was Jello. It was really, holiday in Cambodia. Well, it's fucking great, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, on that kind of level, and guitarists, I'm spoiled for, because I kind of, I've been really lucky. I played with some great players, from Mark Ford to Brian James to Jimmy Page. I've kind of shared a room with all of them at some point, and they were real good. And it's hard to say, yeah, I want to work with that guy forever. Because you can't be, I don't know. It's one of those things as well, as you never really know until you get to the room. Like Mark Ford, for example, I remember jamming with him the first time. And there are some players that you play with and it just, all of a sudden the game changes and it opens up. And Brian's one of those and Mark's one of those. And, there's a few players that do that. And there's some players that you have a natural empathy with. And that's the real decision, is how it works when you're in a small space and there's nobody else listening.
Truth. Well, listen, before we go, I wanted to tell you thank you for spending some time with us. And I'd love to have you come back on whenever you want to come back on. And if you've got something new that you want to promote or talk about or whatever, or what, if you're playing some are you just jamming with anybody right now or doing anything, playing your drums?
I've been in the studio with a band called The Mutants, who it was a guy called Chris Constantin who was a bass player with Adam and the Ants, and a guitar player called Paul Fraser, and we've been in recording some stuff which I'm really pleased with. I've been working in the studio as well with an actress called Jane Horrocks.
Yeah. Wasn't she Bubbles from Absolutely Fabulous?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. I always thought she was so cute.
Oh, she's brilliant, man. She's really, really good to work with. And she's got an amazing voice. She did a great movie called Little Voice.
Wow.
She's got an incredible singing voice. She can make herself sound like anyone at all. And so, yeah, I've done a couple of tracks with her, which has been real cool. I've done some stuff with the Mutants recording. And playing-wise, and I've got a kind of solo thing that I'm working at the moment, which is temporarily called the 50/50s, which is just songs I've been writing and working on, with some friends of mine. And so that's in the drumming. I'm doing a fair amount of studio production work with the band called Flip Front, which is my kind of favourite band I've been working with for ages. And there's a band called Daxels, which are local to me. I've just been in the studio and done another 2 tracks with them. And plus, there's the band from Edinburgh that I'm mixing right now, actually, called the Gin Goblins.
Oh, wow, that's a good name, Gin Goblins.
Yeah, it's a great name, and
that's cool.
And they're a great little band. I'm really pleased with them, but sadly the singer's not around anymore, so I'm kind of doing the album, and kind of, I don't know why, just because it's good and it should come out.
Yeah. Well, you got to work with a band from Arizona called Glass Heroes. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, for sure. My mate Keith. Yeah, they see, I very rarely work with bands that I don't like, either as human beings or their music. And I have to a band has to have kind of an independence of its own and something to say. And also have an attitude of its own. And, when you get locked into a studio with a band, I'm in there for 10, 12 hours a day with these guys. And you've got to be able to smile while you're doing it. And you've got to have confidence to know that when you come out of the studio, you're going to have something that other people are going to go, wow, that pushes my buttons, So the Glass Heroes were good fun. I like those guys.
Well, you in a little bit of a different spin here. You became a character in a children's book.
Really?
Rats, Scabies, and the Holy Grail.
That's not a children's book.
That's what. I'm sorry. That's what somebody said here, and and then somebody else said, no, it's not a children's book. They just refuted anyway.
Yeah, no, that's all about the Holy Grail. Really.
Why somebody would say it's a children's book?
No. Well, perhaps they're well educated and they know more about the subject than I do, which would be. But I know that must have been 5 or 6 years ago when we did that, and I was bought. It's the source story for the Da Vinci Code. And it's all about a priest in a small village in the south of France who gets incredibly wealthy overnight, and nobody knows where he gets the money from or where he got the money from. And it's a true story, and it's still quite recent. And it's recent enough where I can go back to the priest's village and look at the church that he decorated in this sort of bizarre fashion. And so it's still alive in some ways. You don't have to go diving to find the treasure. It's kind of buried around there somewhere still. And there's still gold in them. And also, nobody ever found out where the priest got his money from, and people are still looking.
Yeah.
So I kind of picked up on it and took a friend of mine down. I mean, that's kind of just a very short summary. It's a fascinating story.
Well, I mean, we could sit here and talk all day, but I mean, I kind of... you've done work with Donovan and Neville Staple, who was in the Specials. I mean, you've done other stuff. You're known and loved for being the drummer of the Damned, but you've got quite a resume that goes outside of the Damned as well.
Yeah, I like to get around. Well, working with Joe and at the same time doing like the Vandals and those guys, and just kind of. I like playing the drums. It's the real truth.
Do you still light up your cymbals and set them on fire like you used to?
No. No, I don't.
That was fun.
Yeah, I don't know. I might do. If the right time and the right place, I probably would.
Well, Rat, I have to be honest, man. I'm gonna hope and pray in my heart that one day, whether it's a special occasion or I would love to see you once again, even if it's like I say, if it's a one-off special tour or something. I would love to see you once again do the.
Yeah.
I know, man.
It's one of those. A lot of people ask about it, and I guess I don't know, it just hasn't come up that it's doable.
Yeah. Well,
we've got this documentary being made about us at the moment, and
oh, really?
Yeah, by Wes Orsowski, who did the Lemmy doc, and he nags and nags and nags for a reunion of some kind, even if it's just the four of us in a room together, But I really don't want to do that. I wouldn't mind doing something that's got more. It's got to have purpose. If you're going to do something like that, you have to have a purpose for it rather than just the sake of doing it because some people want you to, or because it will make a good ending to a film. It's got to have a something that makes you feel like you're doing something worthwhile. And and for me, that would have to be a new record.
Well, Rad, I got to be. I don't want to sound morbid, but you and I have touched on this throughout our conversation. And life is unpredictable, man. And I just turned. I mean, I was listening to The Damned when I was 11, 12 years old. I just turned 47. Okay, life is unpredictable. Life is unpredictable. And while all of us are still alive and kicking and in relatively good health, and you yourself, you sound like you're in good health and you sound like you feel good. And, Captain looked great when I saw him. Dave looked great I've not seen Brian James in a number of years, but while you guys are still around and you're in good health, man, I mean.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's, it's a shame that we are and that we're capable, but actually nobody's bothering to do it. There's a lot of politics involved with the fact that if the original lineup, first of all, what's the original lineup? Because I always saw it as 3 stages to the Damned's career, really. You had Brian on guitar, Captain on guitar, then Roman on guitar.
Right.
And they were all 3 very different periods of the band in musical styles. And so, first of all, which reunion do you do?
Right.
Secondly, I don't know. I did have a second reason, but I can't think what it is. But that one alone is just, who do you get and why?
I loved the Phantasmagoria album. I loved that period. I loved them all, to be honest with you. But to me, like I said, Machine Gun Etiquette is my all-time favorite. I love the first 2 records, of course. But, that's, like you say, you just made a very good point, obviously. But
covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, you did.
For a band that still has a career even today, there's very few other groups. Actually, the Stranglers are probably only one of them that still have a career after,
35 years, man.
Mm.
That's a long time, bro.
Yeah, and for a band to be able to make a living out of the grimy music industry for that long is an achievement in itself, So there must have been something good going on there.
Right.
I think the Damned's audience was always its biggest saviour, People like yourself that were just into the band and appreciated the records and everything. And I think they were always there when the band was down and didn't have a record deal and nobody in the industry was interested, we could always play shows and people would always go. And I think, there's a big thank you due to the audience because they very rarely get a round of applause.
Right.
But actually, if it hadn't have been for that, then it wouldn't have been worth bothering. If we'd have been going out to do shows to 25 people and a dog, then it would have soon collapsed. But it was never like that. I mean, while I was with the band, we were always really lucky that people turned up. except for once in Florida.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't remember.
Florida?
Yeah, there must have been, there couldn't have been more than a dozen people there. But actually, it was one of the most memorable gigs because we got on first name terms with all of them. And we asked them each to choose a song. I let some kid play drums and got to see the band. It's the first time it ever happened.
Wow.
But
That's cool.
That was kind of the thing with the Dam, was that it lived in the present world, you know. And so if you were doing a show and there was only 12 people there, then why not, you know, sit with them and hang out and make it a fun evening rather than, you know, morbidly going, oh, we're a failure. We'll never be coming back to Tampa again. I don't know.
Well, Rat, listen, man, I want to, like I said, I want to thank you for your time, and I kind of feel like I need to let you get back to your family, and again, please give them our regards and thank, them for allowing us to have some time with you, and I would love to have you back on when you have some stuff to play, or if you want to just shoot the shit, man, as we say in the States. And but before you leave, if you would do me an honor and just say your name and who you played for, and you're listening to StenchRadio.com.
My name's Rat Scabies. I used to be the drummer with the Damned, and now you're listening to StenchRadio.com.
Beautiful, man. Thank you so much. Rat Scabies, bro, thank you so much for your time. And I really do appreciate it. It's been a thrill to talk with you. Again, we're not going to tell you goodbye. We're going to say we'll see you later.
All right, see you later, man.
All right, brother. Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.